This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, we've got a real fun show for you today. This is something that I love doing. We've got somebody on who is a real estate investor. No surprise there, right? But the neat thing is this is a guy who has basically started investing after his 50s. Not only that, but he has made his first multifamily purchase. I thought that this would be really great for you guys to meet. His name is David Sweeney, and he's a police officer, real estate investor, real estate agent also from Seattle, Washington. David has been married to his wife, Maggie, for about 18 years. They have 3 children, 11, 13, and 15. David has been with the Seattle Police Department for over 30 years, where he currently serves as a lieutenant in charge of reviewing police use of force. He also serves as a trainer for the department and is a certified mediator specializing in negotiating workplace conflict, something I'm sure he could use in negotiating prices on multifamilies.
Absolutely.
David earned his degree in Law, Society, and Justice from the University of Washington late in life, returning to school when he was 42 years old. He's a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest award available from Toastmasters International. So he's going to put me to shame here as we go on this interview. I know it. But David serves as a member of the McKinley Foundation, dedicated to helping children in need in the Puget Sound area, as well as a board member of the Northwest Girls Choir. David just made his first multifamily purchase, which is what we're going to go into here, a 24-unit apartment building in Washington State. And he's here to tell us more about that transaction. Well, David, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Thanks so much for having me, Bill. It's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. We thank you for your service. First responders, I'll tell you, especially in today's times, are just, I think, the most high respected people that I can think of. So often having to put your life on the line and in so many other situations that, to protect people and to keep peace. It's really fantastic to have somebody who's been so loyal, 30 years on the force. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, 30 years, going on 31.
Gosh, that's great. Well, David, I know that everybody's here really wants to hear your story and find out about your first purchase too, and I'll try to dig in and get some details there. But why don't you just tell us, just a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this crazy real estate world?
Well, absolutely. First off, Bill, it's great to be a guest on your show. I'm 54 years old, so I think I meet the minimum requirement for being an avid listener of your show because And let me tell you how I found you is because last December, I turned 53, and that's the minimum retirement age for a police officer in the state of Washington. And you might equate me to, I wasn't poor by any means, but I definitely resembled Poor Dad more than Rich Dad from Kiyosaki's book. I mean, I had that government job. I worked for, 30 years trying to make ends meet for my family and provide a life for them. And as I turned 53, I started to evaluate my life. I started to think about, where am I going? Where do I want to be? I still had 3, fairly young children, as you read in my bio, 11, 13, and 15. And I've got college costs coming up, and I wanted to get them every advantage they can for a start in life. And it became apparent to me that just this government retirement was not going to be the lifestyle that I wanted in retirement with my wife. And I wanted her to have the option to work or not. If she wanted to work, that's great. She's an attorney and has a great job, but, I think her heart is in service. She wants to do something more to help people. And it seemed to me, when I put all these factors together and turning 53, it was kind of like, there was sort of a sense of relief that I could retire at any time from the police department that I wanted to, but yet financially I couldn't retire. There was no way, particularly with the 3 kids. So that's when I started evaluating, what am I going to do post-career, post-retirement? And that led me to your podcast. So if you search retirement and homes and real estate and things like that, Bill Manasero's podcast comes up. And I became an avid listener of your podcast. And I want to thank you for all the great guests that you've had on and the advice that I've gotten from your show. And it's so exciting now to be on the other side and now actually be able to give an interview and kind of talk about my life and where I'm going. So let's go back again to now December of 2016. I considered purchasing Subway sandwich shops. I considered selling healthcare products, et cetera, and I said, no, real estate is where I want to be. And as you say, cash flow is king, right? So I started evaluating properties and thinking about what could I buy. I didn't have a whole lot of extra money lying around. And as I started learning more about real estate, I'm an avid learner. So whether it be podcasts, books, articles, blogs, you name it, I learn everything I can about the subject. And it seemed to me that there was a distinct lack, at least in Western Washington, where I live, of real estate agents that would spend the time to find a property that would cash flow the way I wanted it to. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do about this? Because I had yet to make my purchase, but I thought, okay, I know, I will become a real estate agent. And then I can buy and sell my own deals. I can do my own transactions. I get to peek behind the curtain and see what's in the MLS there. So I studied for my real estate exam, and I passed, of course, first try in April of this year. So it was great. And like I said, the curtain opened up. I could look behind and see what's going on and see what's out there as far as commercial properties. And like most investors, I started thinking about the duplex, triplex, fourplex areas because they were cheaper properties. It was easier to afford, and you could get a residential loan. But the more I investigated, the more I thought about this, I said, no, multifamily is where I need to be. That's where the cash flow would come from, and that's where I wanted to be in life. So I guess we move forward to April after I got my license, and that's when I started evaluating properties. And I'll bet between April and August of this year, I evaluated 400 properties is my conservative estimate of, the number that I thought, how can an agent spend this amount of time with me and find a deal like this? So it was great doing my own deal.
You were mentioning that, okay, that you're looking at these other areas, buying a franchise and maybe going into, supplements or whatever. And
right.
Was there really sort of a light bulb moment where you said, boom, real estate's really it? I mean, that's where it's at.
There was. Okay. There was a light bulb moment. And it was almost exactly, it was in December of last year. And I was at the Amazon bookstore in Seattle. And we're one of the few places, I think, because Amazon is headquartered here, where we have an actual Amazon bookstore you can go to. And I went past and I saw the Bigger Pockets book on buying real estate. And I just picked it off the shelf and bought it right then and there. I thought, hey, I know some people that have rental properties. I wonder what this is all about. And that was my light bulb moment, because I devoured that book probably in a day or two. And I went, this is it. This is where I'm going. This is going to be my future. I'm going to be a real estate investor, because there were so many advantages financially. Someone else pays your mortgage for you. You get tax advantages. You get appreciation. And I loved that I could control my investment. In other words, you can buy and sell stock in Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Amazon, you name it, but you have no control over how well those companies are run, or if people are going to buy and sell that stock, or if the market's going to go up or the market's going to go down. Now, real estate, of course, has its fluctuations too, but at least I have the control over my property and what it's going to do, as far as, can I increase rents? Can I decrease expenses? If I've done that, then wow, I've just increased the value of my holdings. And I love that about real estate. And it really drew me in and told me this is where I need to be.
Yeah, and it's something tangible too, something that you can walk over to your building and you can touch it and you can,
yes.
And you go, I own this thing.
Yeah,
and
you can drive down the street and be proud to see it, and go, wow, this is great. I'm providing a nice home for people.
Exactly. I mean, as opposed to a Microsoft stock or Apple stock, where
yes.
You just got some number. You've got something in a statement, and that says, that you own so many shares of stock. I mean, to me, there's no comparison.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Bill.
Another question, too, that popped up really, and because I get asked this one a lot. A lot of people say, well, should I become an agent if I'm going to become an investor? Mm-hmm. And I know people on both sides. I know people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years that are agents, that started off as agents. And then I know people that have never been agents that just started off as investors that are very successful. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you so far have found to be very advantageous? Are you glad you made that step?
I'm glad I made that step, but I don't think it's required. I think in a lot of aspects of real estate, there's any number of ways to do something, right? What I think the message I'd like to get across to your old dog listeners is that pick a method that seems to work to you, that seems to make sense, that's interesting to you, that you're vested in, and then pursue that. Some people like to fix and flip. Some people like to buy and hold. Some people like tax liens and looking in the foreclosure market. Some people have their real estate license. Some people drive for dollars. Some people make phone calls and do direct mail. There's any number of ways that you can get started in the real estate business. And you can start small or you can start large. I'm in the starting phase, but you and I both know that there's plenty of people out there that make a very successful living for themselves as real estate investors, and that's where I want to get to. So I don't think it's required. For me, it made sense. It seemed to be something that I could use because I'm a very detail-oriented person. I like to know the details. I like to look into the financials. I like to pay attention to contracts and things like that. So when you have that detail analysis brain like I seem to have, being an agent makes sense to me, because I can spend hours and hours on the MLS just looking over properties, evaluating them, checking the financials, see if this deal makes sense or not. But I know there's many people that say, I don't want to do that. I just want to have an agent that sends me deals, and when I find one that I like, I say, great, let's go out and buy it. So I don't think there absolutely is a right or wrong answer. For me, it made sense, and I'm sure you have some listeners and friends that it works for them. But others say, no, that's not my deal. I don't need to be an agent, and they're quite successful. I think you can do it both ways. Long term, probably when I get big enough, I probably won't have the need to have the real estate license. Although, I don't know, I think I'd kind of miss it. I love being able to do my own transactions and look behind the scenes and study the MLS.
That's neat. And well, let's dig into this process that you went through. I mean, this is the hardest part for everybody is that first purchase. And
absolutely,
I think it'd be great to just kind of see, where did you start? How did you start? And, just give us a rundown as best you can, an overview.
Sure. Well, as I said, I turned 53, and my wife is very supportive of me. If I want to keep working in law enforcement for another 10 years and make it 40 years, she's fine with that. If I want to turn my life in a different direction and look elsewhere, she's okay with that too. So I love having that support from her. So I said, here's what I want to do. I want to get my real estate license, and I want us to buy and hold properties. That was my strategy, buy and hold. And she was all in on that. In fact, I think she'd mentioned it throughout the years. Hey, if we ever buy another house, why don't we just keep the one we're in and rent it? And, we'd kind of had brief talks about that, but I'd never pursued it. I was always happy with my government job. So I said, here's what I want to do. And I kind of started looking at the market, and I'd show her deals that I'd found. Again, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, that type of thing. Not in Seattle, too expensive here, but I would look south and north of here in some of the markets along I-5. That was important to me. So I said, honey, this is what we're going to do. I want to buy an apartment building. She said, wow, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, we have the advantage of having a house in Seattle. And as you probably know, Bill, the housing market in Seattle, kind of similar to some of the housing that you see down in California too, it just exploded and went crazy. All of a sudden, I'm looking at all this equity I have in my house. And I thought, ooh, there's a source of funds that I can use. So we took out a refinance on the house, and I took out $380,000, and I put it in the bank. And it was funny just watching it sit in the bank. Even though it's $380,000, the interest they'd accumulated was so minor. It was crazy. So anyway, I had this money sitting in the bank just waiting for the right deal. And that kind of got me started. It took me April through August to find the deal that I was interested in. So as I started looking around, I started looking bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, I know to some people out there, 24 units is not that big. But for me, that was a big deal. That was a big step from I skipped the rental house duplex, triplex area and went right to a multifamily 24 unit property. So I found the deal on the MLS. It had been on the market 2 or 3 months, and it was listed at $1.325 million. And it was kind of an interesting deal. It was a package deal. It was 3 tax parcels. And on these 3 tax parcels was the 24-unit apartment building, a 15-unit storage garage, storage units, and a single-family residence, and a parking lot. I thought, wow, look at this. I get different aspects of rental market. I've got a house now that I'll be able to rent out. I can get into the storage unit marketplace, but the gem, the prize, obviously was the 24-unit apartment building. So it was listed at 1.325, and I went through the financials and evaluated the market there. It's in Centralia, Washington, it lives up to its name. It's centrally located between Portland and Seattle. So it's an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours drive south of Seattle. And I offered them 1.1, and they countered at 1.14, and that was our closing price. And I also had them pay 1% of the closing costs, which took care of most of the closing costs. And I got my real estate commission on top of that. So walking out of the deal, I came out with $40,000. I thought, wow, this is a great deal. What a great country we live in.
That's great.
So that was my purchase, and I just closed on it in October. So I've had it for about 2 months now, and I love it. It's great. It's exactly what I was thinking being a property owner, being a real estate investor would be. And it's exciting.
Was it full in terms of occupancy when you bought it?
It was.
Okay.
Centralia is not a super in-demand city as far as the rates that you can get for rents, right? The rental. But the vacancy is very low. So most apartment buildings in Centralia are going to rent for less than $1,000 a month. So you might say that it's a little bit similar to some of the places in the Midwest that I know a lot of investors like. But luckily, it's in my backyard. I don't have to pay Seattle prices. I can pay a more reasonable price there in Centralia. And initially, it had 8 studios that rented for roughly $425 to $475 a month, and it had 16 one-bedrooms in it that rented from $475 to $525. So the previous owner had just done a rent increase of $50 a month, and that was not factored in. I don't believe it was factored into the final price. So that's an immediate value add that I didn't even have to do. They were already raising the rents $50 a month. And it was important for me to have a property manager because I don't intend to be a daily check-in on my property type guy. I want to be fairly passive. I want to know what's going on, but get calls if it's something over $200. So I found a great property manager in the Centralia area. And he said, no, David, even with that increase, you can still get more for the market rent for these apartments. So I've already increased the value of my holdings just by having rents come up to, more appropriate, $525 for a studio and $625 for a one-bedroom. And of course, if people are under contract, you obviously can't raise them, but that's eventually the goal. And that's still a very fair market price for Centralia, Washington. Wow. So I don't feel I'm gouging anyone. I'm providing a nice place for them to live. And using some of the money I got out of the transaction, I'm making improvements in the property and, new carpets and lighting and a better laundry facility, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some positive changes that I'm making in the property. I don't just want to walk in and go, hey, new owner, raising rents. No, I want to provide some value for the tenants, to value them as partners in this transaction and work with them while still maintaining, an appropriate market price.
Sure. Well, did you have to do anything else in the units themselves, or were they pretty much upgraded?
So I had a great property inspector that had helped me in some prior purchase attempts, shall we say, either properties that didn't close for one reason or another, either they failed inspection or the seller backed out of the deal, things like that. But anyway, so I called him up and I said, hey, I got another property for you to inspect. And he said, oh, what is it? I said, you won't believe this. And I told him it's a 24-unit apartment building, a 15-unit storage building, and a rental house. And he went, wow, you really stepped up your game, didn't you? I said, I sure did. So we set the inspection date, and I felt it was important to go in every apartment. So, of course, you have to make notice to all the tenants that we're going to be coming through on a certain date. Prospective owner is evaluating the property. So we went inside every unit, and my inspector did a great job. They prepared an excellent, thorough report that I still have and use right now. So when a unit comes vacant, I look back at the inspection report and I say, oh, okay, unit 106, here's some of the changes that we need to do and make. The individual units didn't require a lot of work. Now, this is an older building. I'm not going to say that this is anything state of the art, but it's appropriate for the market there, in other words. It's well painted. It's well maintained. It's actually in a very nice neighborhood. I would like to live in this neighborhood, and that was important to me, to find a place that I'd be comfortable living. If I'm comfortable living there, then other people should be comfortable living there. So the units themselves, back to your question, Bill, did not require a whole lot of work. Just more updating, particularly from a energy and water conservation standpoint.
Oh, do you have appliances that you provide?
Yes. So refrigerator, gas ranges come with the units.
Right.
And that's really the only appliances. There's no other microwaves or things like that. So when a unit comes vacant, I move in and make sure we have low flow shower heads, toilet, sinks, things like that, just to reduce the energy consumption.
What kind of heating do you have?
It's electric baseboard heat, and the tenants pay the electricity, and I pay water, sewer, and garbage.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So did you put in all water conservation toilets and so forth, or are you kind of doing that as they become available?
I'm doing that as the units become vacant.
Okay, gotcha.
So, there was the thought of doing it all at once, and I think I'm just going to do it a little bit at a time. A unit comes vacant. Like this week, we have one vacancy. So I'm going to go down and take a look at it. And I probably know exactly what it's I took pictures when I went through the inspections. And, it's got the old corner sinks with both a hot water and a cold water outlet. In other words, you either have cold or hot, and there's nothing in between.
Right.
I'll get them a new sink with an actual faucet handle that you can modulate and get something called warm. It's this, great concept that they didn't seem to have in the 1920s.
Oh, was it built in the 20s?
Yeah, it's a 1920 building, so it's 97 years old. But it's a classic old brick building.
Oh, I love that. That's what they have in Indianapolis. Same deal. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. If you go to my website, you can see a picture of it.
Oh, great. Well, neat. Well, let's just take a little step back here. Okay,
Sure.
It's obviously different buying a commercial property than it is buying a residential. Just a typical residential. 1 to 4 units.
Right.
But tell me about financing and the banks and that part of it.
Sure, that was a challenge because I didn't have a whole lot of experience. I had a couple things that I had 3 things that I could primarily rely on. And I think probably my first few phone calls when I was a little bit new to the process, I didn't realize the advantages I have. And so I heard several no's before I got to my yes. But what I found, the strengths that I could provide to the deal was actually there's 4 advantages that I have. So number 1, I have W-2 income. That's banks like that.
That's a big
a regular income coming in. I'm not just a real estate investor. So they like that I have a paycheck coming in. That's kind of nice. Number 2, I managed an apartment building in college.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a little something. It was a 16 unit, but I was the on-site manager, and I could say I had that experience at least of collecting rent and doing repairs and making sure that a property looked nice. It's things like that. Third advantage, I had my real estate license. So
right.
I can say that, I have the ability to find transactions that will make financial sense. And then the fourth advantage I had, I told them that I would use a professional management company, that even though I was new to this, fairly new as being an owner, I was not going to be flying by the seat of my pants. I would have a professional company that would do the rent collection, that they would know what market rents should be. And when I put those strengths together, I finally found a regional bank that would say yes. So I did have to dial for dollars, so to speak. And I got several no's, but I wasn't too discouraged. There's a lot of banks out there, local and regional. And I knew I avoided the national banks. I'd heard too many horror stories of, them backing out at the last minute and leaving investors hanging. So the nice thing about finding a regional commercial bank, again, I'm moving away from the residential loan. You have to go commercial if you're going to go 5 units or more, that I had another set of eyes now that's looking at the deal. So if I brought them a deal that made no financial sense, they're not going to finance me. They said, David, this does not make sense. But I avoided that problem. Again, by evaluating 400 deals, I found plenty that would make money and plenty that didn't. But when I finally found the one that seemed to be the answer to the solution I was looking for, then I presented it to the bank and I said, look at this. The debt coverage ratio is outstanding. The price I can negotiate down. There's room for improvement as far as the rents go. And the building is very solid. My inspectors looked at it and they said, yeah, this looks like a great deal. So negotiated the transaction and they said, we think probably the building's worth 1.2. So they said, don't go at 1.325. I said, I think 1.2 is very fair, but I'm going to come in under that. That's my goal. And that's why I was happy to report that I got it for 1.14. So I'm money ahead as far as the bank is concerned. They're very happy with the deal. They're profiting from the deal. I'm profiting, and I'm providing a nice place for people to live. So it's a win-win for everyone, Bill.
Oh, that's great. And, you walk into it, not only do you walk into it with equity already in the building, but
right.
The things that you're doing on the value add part of it, cutting the water expenses, increasing the rents, you're boosting your value even more. So even though it may not be in a bustling area where, prices are going up to the roof, it doesn't have to, because you're basically creating your own, equity there in the steps that you're taking, which is fantastic. I mean, that's ideal.
like you always say, cash flow is king.
Hey,
I got that straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, right? So, no, I give you credit for that. I really said, hey, I need to cash flow. That's why you can buy a property in Seattle, but you're not going to pay the mortgage. You're counting on appreciation of the property, and then you're only going to get that benefit when you sell it. And you're kind of playing the market at that point. You're hoping, you're guessing that the Seattle market will continue to increase and that you're going to get some sky-high valuation when it comes time to sell. But I wanted cash flow. Hey, if Centralia appreciates, that's just icing on the cake. I view appreciation as a nice bonus, but it's not what I was counting on. I wanted something that would pay for the expenses, pay for the principal and interest, and still put money in my pocket. So I really tried to follow everything that you preach on your show.
Awesome. And how far is Centralia from where you live?
It's about an hour and a half drive.
Okay, that's nothing.
Maybe hour 45 minutes. So I wanted something on the I-5 corridor. And so Seattle's centrally located in the state of Washington. So I could go a couple hours south, a couple hours north. And basically, you can travel the length of Washington there. So I valued properties in Bellingham and Marysville and Tacoma and Pierce County and Vancouver. So finally finding that property in Centralia, which is still a decent driving distance for me. So I can come and check in on the property. I can meet with my property manager. I can meet with a tenant if I need to. Things like that are still doable. I know many investors are successful investing out of state or investing in areas they don't know anything about. For my first deal, and in fact, I don't really see myself investing out of state. I think I'll keep investing in Washington, a place I know. I know the cities and I know the towns. I know, which cities are doing well financially and which ones are kind of strapped for cash. And just find nice neighborhoods in those cities, and that's where I'll be looking to invest.
Oh, that's great. Well, just looking at the experience you've had. Now, granted, you haven't had the years and years of experience. I mean, this is really fresh, which makes this even more exciting on this interview because you've got everything fresh in your mind still. And
right.
What would you say in the process? Whether from seeking out the property, the hunt, so to speak, all the way to closing. What would you say was maybe your biggest mistake? Something that you'll do differently next time?
So I had two mistakes that I could probably talk about that might help your listeners. Number one was in regards to insurance. So I spoke to the owner. This was after we'd negotiated the price. And I said, hey, would you mind if I got the name of your insurance agent? They probably are familiar with the property and hopefully they could help me out and I don't have to shop around a lot for insurance. And they said, sure. So they gave me the agent name and number. I call her up on the phone. We have a nice conversation over the phone. She says, great, I'll jump on this and get you everything you need. And again, I think I had a 45-day close. So I've still got a month and a half till closing. And I kind of forgot about it. So the mistake, don't forget about your insurance. It's really important.
Right.
So we're moving through the transaction. I formed an LLC, and we can get into that if you want and things like that. But as we're getting closer to closing date, we're about a week out, and my bank said, okay, we need your insurance binder. I said, great. So I call up, again, insurance now coming to mind. I should have been thinking of this earlier. But I thought, well, surely everything's fine now, right? So I call her up, and it was a nightmare because she wasn't in, or she was at training, or I didn't even know if she didn't work there anymore. I don't know what. My phone calls and my emails are not getting returned. And I was in a bit of a panic. So now that left me on the phone. This is what I primarily spent my last week of closing doing, is telling my bank and telling escrow, hey, I'm working on it. I had to call all these different insurance underwriters to try to find someone that would write a policy. And it's a little bit challenging on a 1920 building. It's older. It's got modern electrical meters, but there's still some knob and tube present. So that makes it a challenge to find your insurance. So I'm calling all these different insurance brokers and getting quotes, and everything was more than I thought it was going to be. Again, I'm still trying to contact the original agent who said that she could write a policy on it. And I thought, well, let me get into contact with someone from her office. And actually that worked. I found someone else in the office and they said, oh, yeah, I don't remember. The excuses still don't make sense to me. But they said, oh, yeah, she's unavailable, but here, we'll help you out and we'll get you taken care of. So I had to go back to the seller and actually ask for a 2-day extension. It was going to close October 16th. We had to close on October 18th, just because I didn't do my due diligence in making sure that I had my insurance binder in place. So that was a big mistake. I'll never make that mistake again. As soon as I get a property under contract, I'll start lining up an insurance company and have them give me an actual quote. And so that all I need to do is sign and send them money, and I've got an insurance binder ready to go on the property. I'm sure plenty of other experienced investors have probably said, oh, yeah, I do that automatically. Well, I didn't. So that was definitely a lesson learned for me. The second lesson would be, even though there was a new roof in 2016, I believe, so it's a fairly new roof, I should have had a proper roof inspection done, because there's still some drainage issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, water's not running into people's apartments, but not all the water makes it to the downspouts, and so it kind of runs off the side of the building. I had a couple inspectors come out. Again, I had my main property inspector, but he doesn't do roofs. So I called a couple roofing companies, and again, I didn't know any companies to call in Centralia. So basically, guys in pickup trucks with ladders showed up, and they don't know anything about a commercial building or getting up on top of a 2-story building or evaluating a large surface roof area and things like that. So at that point, I was kind of committed. I had a 10-day due diligence for a physical inspection of the property. And so if I had to do it over again, I'd either ask for a little bit longer time to do that physical inspection, or I would make sure I had a proper roofing contractor available to come out and evaluate the roof. Because then, again, I'm buying it kind of late fall. There wasn't a lot of rain, believe it or not, for Seattle. There wasn't a lot of rain, so I didn't know about this problem with the water running off. So I don't think it's going to damage the building, but it is something I'm going to have to spend some money and get fixed properly here fairly soon.
God, those are two great tips for our listeners.
Yeah.
Well, conversely, what would you say sort of the biggest success in this process?
So certainly I think the biggest success is that I was able to negotiate the price down $185,000. So that was a big success. And even at full price, I think this was a good deal, right? So the sellers, they were elderly and they were trying to get out of the market. They had about 4 apartment buildings and several duplexes for sale, and they basically put everything on the market at one time. So I think, I don't know, just somehow I was blessed, I guess, to find this transaction at the right time, that somehow it had escaped notice of other investors, and to find the property, to see that it was already going to make money at full price, then to negotiate the price less down to 1.14, and then there's still things I can do to value add. Again, like you and I talked about, if the rental rates are under the market, get them to the proper rate. Don't gouge people, but bring it to the proper rate for Centralia, Washington, and lower expenses. I've just increased the value of my property. And I think that's my greatest success, is finding a place that makes great financial sense, that cash flows, and that I can now even continue to improve and make even better cash flow. So I'm kind of excited about that process, I have to tell you. So that I think that's the greatest success, and being able to provide a nice place for people to live, to make some improvements there. Like, I don't have to go in and replace the lighting in the hallways and the carpeting in the hallways, but those are a couple things just quickly off the top of my head as I walk through the property, or the laundry room needs updating. As I walk through the property, I go, I think I'd like living here better if I had better carpeting. I think this dark spot in the hallway here, if I had better lighting, this would be improved. Hey, these laundry facilities are a little bit out of date. Let's see if we can update that. So I don't mind spending some money on the property. Again, I walked out of the deal with some cash. So I don't mind putting some money back into the property because it'll make it a better place for people to live and hopefully increase the value more. So when it comes time to sell, that the next owner will say, hey, at least it's got nice looking carpets in it. At least the laundry's nice and things like that. So that's some of my biggest success is just being able to analyze a property financially to make sure it makes sense and then do value add components.
That's excellent. Well, what would, there's probably a lot of people listening that are just either in the exact same situation or pretty close,
right,
that are listening right now. And what advice would you have for them? Not only, in how they should get started, but, I think the thing that really gets me is just the trouble that people have to overcome to get started.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess you would say I took massive action, a phrase that everyone's probably heard before. But when I got that idea in my head last December, it's been almost a year to the day. When I got that idea, I never dreamt in a year I would own, at least for me, it's probably actually considered a mid-size apartment building. I know it's not large. I hear some of the people you have on with 180 units, 400 units, things like that. So I know that's what large is. So I'm on the small end. But still, I never would have imagined that that's where I would be in a year. But the only way I got where I was going is by taking massive action. And the main things that I did is I was willing to refinance my house to take cash out. Now, maybe not everyone has that ability, but I was blessed in that way. So I could take that cash and invest it in a property. Number two, I was willing to study everything I could about real estate. In fact, not only to study about real estate, but study to become a real estate agent so that I can do my own transactions. And I would have a hard time finding an agent that would be able to spend the amount of time I did in order to find the right transaction. So I was willing to put in the time. I guess I'm kind of blessed. I don't require a lot of sleep at night. So when the family goes to bed, I stay up and evaluate properties. I work during the day, but I do what's kind of fun at night. I enjoy this aspect of researching properties, of evaluating properties. So for your listeners out there, I would encourage them, whatever they're doing right now, that's great. If you're reading books right now, that's perfect. Hey, they're listening to this podcast. That's great, because I can't tell you how many ideas I got from your guests that you've had on previously and yourself when you do your own daily podcast where it's just you talking. I got tons of advice from that. So I assume that there is listeners out there that are getting the same advice. What they need to do is now move towards the next step. You have to take this information and turn it into action. So whether it's moving from podcast to now maybe you start evaluating properties. That was one of the first pieces of advice I heard. You need to be able to learn to evaluate a property. So start evaluating properties. Maybe start contacting brokers. Maybe you need to go to real estate meetups. Maybe you need to find some people at work and you're all interested in buying a property together. I don't know. I'm not saying they need to jump into syndication, but there's things that you can do. If you're doing more today than you were doing yesterday, you've made some progress. So keep a log. Write down what you did. And on that log, put your goal down for what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do next week, what's coming next month, and where do you see yourself in a year? When I went through real estate agent training, have you ever heard of ninja selling?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's a program it's not just for real estate agents. That happened to be where I learned about ninja selling. But one of the primary things they have you do every morning is visualization and goal setting. So that you wake up in the morning, you visualize where you want to be, and you trick your brain. You basically write 30 times in a row every day, where do you want to be financially in the future, whether it be in a month, in a year, whatever the case might be. So I put down some obscene number that I won't share with you, Bill. I'm kind of embarrassed to say. But every day for a month, I wrote down where I want to be financially, and I went over my goals that I would have for the coming year. And I'm happy to say that I've reached a lot of those goals with this purchase and the ability to cash flow and the ability to acquire property. And now I'm starting to look for what's going to be my next deal. So I've met a lot of my goals. And I think a lot of that is just knowing what they are and taking steps to reach them. Doing more today than I did yesterday, doing more tomorrow than I did today, and making sure that progress is being made, that I write down what I've done, and that I make sure and know where I'm going. So I guess that would be my biggest advice for listeners. If you're listening to podcasts, that's great, but let's move on to the next step. And keep listening, right? Learning never stops, but at some point action has to start. So if you're just sitting on the sidelines and not doing anything, you're either going to eventually lose interest, or you're never going to do a deal, or you'll be the guy. Yeah, real estate, I looked into that for a while, but I never pulled the trigger. So I was willing to pull the trigger, and I hope that my story can be inspirational to others that are waiting, that are just kind of standing by and not sure what their next step is, that there's action they can take.
That's great. Well, I honestly believe that too. I think a dream is a dream, without a timeline, without specific things that you have to do, and
right.
You need to set goals to make it something more than that, and and then you have to implement the goals to actually get action out of it. And so, I think that's a key point. And just on that, what goal have you set for yourself? I mean, what are you looking to achieve in this in the long term?
So my next goal, and I'm still in the learning process about this, but my next goal is 100 or more units.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, that's my definite goal. Now, I already told you and your listeners that I did that refinance. I took the cash out and I spent most of it on this apartment building. All right. So I don't have that luxury next time. So I need to figure out this game called syndication. Right. And I need to be with like-minded investors. I need to get out there and meet more people. So I know what I need to do. I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but I know that that's my next goal. If I'm really going to take this to the next step and move on to these really large properties, it's going to take some partnering out there. You can only do so much by yourself. So right. I need to partner more. That's my next goal.
Okay, that's great, David. You'll do it. I can tell.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're not going to have any
Thanks
problem.
For the encouragement.
Well, the show has kind of zipped by, and it's a shame because you have so much good information for everybody. But we're at our wrap it up session now, and
understood.
If you are ready, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go for it. Favorite real estate book?
I would have to say the book on how to crush it in apartments and commercial real estate. I'm not sure I have the title exactly perfect there, but How to Crush It in Real Estate. I love that book, and I've read it twice.
Yeah, well, the guy that did that, gosh, let's see if I can remember his name. Here, I'm having an old dog moment here, but
right,
yeah, he was on the show, and from the Chicago area, I believe.
Yeah,
really, just that's an excellent book, a good choice. Favorite business book?
I love the 80-20. Just learning about the principles of knowing that 20% of your work generates 80% of your results. And I see that a lot in police work. I see that a lot in real estate. So the 80-20 principle is a great book I recommend to people.
Yeah, that's great. Brian Murray was the guy's name. I remember.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Brian
right.
Murray. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, most valuable website for success?
I'd have to say Bigger Pockets. And I know a lot of people say that, but it really is a great place to get connected. I've had several real estate connections there. And when I evaluate a property, I created my own little Excel spreadsheet just to do a quick evaluation of the numbers to see if it's something I want to spend more time on. And if I do, I then plug the financials into the BiggerPockets rental calculator. So I really recommend that, and I find a lot of value in that site.
That's great. How about favorite app?
My favorite app would definitely be JotNote. I have used that one so much since getting started in real estate. With JotNote Pro, I can take any document and scan it with my phone and email it to myself or email it to a client. I can do any number of things with it. And then it stores the document, and it's just so handy. I don't do this scanning, saving, and emailing and then looking for the document anymore. It's just too many steps. With the phone, it's perfect because it even takes your document and it enhances it and makes it look rectangular. So it works perfect. And it's really great for receipts too, because now I'm keeping track of my work expenses.
Sure.
So when I have a quick receipt, I immediately go to JotNote, take a picture of it, and send it to my Dropbox. And now I can throw the receipt away. So I'm not walking around with wallet full of receipts or boxes full of receipts. So I heartily recommend that app.
Great. How about favorite quote?
My favorite quote is, the true measure of success is not how financially secure you are, but whether what you're doing makes you happy or not. It's an Albert Schweitzer quote, and I'm not doing it justice. But if you're happy with what you're doing, you are successful. That's the basic idea of the quote.
That's excellent. And our final question, if you lost everything and you only had $1,000 in cash left, what would you do with that $1,000 to try to reestablish yourself?
I think I would join real estate meetups, and I'd establish a website with that $1,000 to make sure I'm reaching out to people. I'd buy some business cards, and I would get reconnected with real estate investors. And I would make sure that I have a web presence, because so many people are looking for a web presence. They want to see that you're connected, that your words, what you're saying, matches up to your online presence. And then the rest of the money I would probably pay for my real estate exam, real estate license, and make sure that I was current with those state requirements, so that I could then have that inroad back into real estate. So that's what I do with my $1,000.
Great. Well, we are pretty much almost wrapped up here, and I have just really enjoyed this. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that probably want to talk to you. Who knows? Maybe you'll start building up potential partnerships, and who knows what.
That's my goal.
Yeah. So how can people reach you? What's the best way?
On my website, it's davidsweeney.com, DavidSweeney.com. And if they forget that there's 3 E's in Sweeney, if they type in NY, it'll still redirect to davidsweeney.com. But there they can see the property that I bought. You can see my apartment building. And you can reach me if you're interested in a real estate agent who can help you find similar transactions to what I did. And then eventually, I think I'll be using this in order to reach out for partnerships and things that I think will be probably the next step in my real estate journey, making sure that I'm not just doing this alone. So I'd love to help people that are interested in, particularly in Western Washington. That would be my basic backyard of finding properties for people here. And so, yeah, davidsweeney.com.
That's great. Well, I think you already know what's coming up here. And
I know what's coming up. I'm excited about what's coming up.
And, you're from Washington, right? So
right.
There's not a lot of dogs up there, but there's wolves, right? So
there are wolves. And actually, we have very high pet ownership here in Washington. We're among, in fact, when there's floods and disasters around the country, we get a ton of extra pets up here in Washington State because we're so likely to adopt. But yes, we do have wolves here in Washington.
I love it. So I'm looking forward to a great howl here. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm worried I'm going to blow out the speakers here. I'm not sure. I better hold my computer a little bit away. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Ah!
Oh, man. Well, I can tell you right now, my headphones are about 10 inches away from my head right now.
That felt so good. I listened to your show for so long and heard good and bad howls, and I thought, man, if I ever make it on Bill's show, he's going to get a good howl.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably moving yourself into the finals of the Golden Howl Awards on that one. Man, oh man.
Oh, that's great.
Well, David, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing. I know you're just getting started and probably a little bit of anticipation, maybe a little nervousness coming on, but man, we were just total information packed there that allowed, I think, a lot of our listeners to be able to just walk away with a lot of great information and some good tips too. So,
well, thank you. I tried to provide some value for them and some inspiration as well.
Well, we're going to be tracking you. So your next purchase, we may have you back on again here. So
sounds good.
Yeah, I think you got some neat stuff going, and you're working full time, which is totally amazing here. So can't forget that. It's not like you have nothing else to do. You've got a full time job.
I'll eventually transition those two. To cut back on the police work and increase the real estate side.
Well, great. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate you for joining us.
Okay, Bill. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. And I also want to thank all our Old Dog listeners out there for joining us today. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken this time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. So please note, Old Dog listeners, if you've missed anything, if David said something and you didn't get it all, don't worry about it. Everything is going to be summarized in our show notes, and all the links, all the things that he mentioned about that would have a link to them, as well as his website will be in there as well. So you can get all of that at our show notes at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog, and then you'll look for the episode with David Sweeney. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, and you've heard this on the show today, cash flow is king, and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward, and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.